The snow came down in sheets so thick that Sullivan could barely see her own hands gripping the reins of the stolen horse beneath her. Blood from a split lip mixed with the icy precipitation on her face as she urged the animal forward through the Montana wilderness, away from the cabin where her father's fists had finally convinced her that death by freezing was preferable to one more night under his roof. She was 21 years old, and this was the first choice she had ever made entirely for herself. The horse stumbled in a drift, nearly throwing her, and Catherine's fingers were so numb she could barely hold on. Her thin coat, the only one she had managed to grab before her older brother Samuel had spotted her in the barn, did nothing against the December cold of 1883. She had left behind her mother's silent, downcast eyes, her father's whiskey-soaked rage, and the arranged marriage to a 50-year-old cattle buyer that was supposed to happen in 3 days. The wedding dress still hung in her room, a white prison she would never wear. Her father would come after her. He always came after things he considered his property, and Catherine had no illusions about what she represented to Thomas Sullivan. She was currency, a transaction that would settle his debts and earn him favor with a man who had money and influence in Bannack. The fact that Catherine would rather die than marry Ernest Caldwell, with his yellow teeth and wandering hands, had never factored into her father's calculations. The horse whinnied, a sound of pure distress, and Catherine realized the animal could go no further. She slid from the saddle, her legs nearly buckling when her boots hit the ground. Everything was white and gray, the world erased by the blizzard. She had no idea where she was, how far she had come, or in which direction safety might lie. The horse's flanks heaved, steam rising from its body, and Catherine knew with a sick certainty that she had pushed the creature too hard. "I'm sorry," she whispered, her voice stolen by the wind. "I'm so sorry." She tried to take a step forward, but her legs gave out. The cold had seeped into her bones and her body was shutting down. Catherine fell to her knees in the snow, then onto her side. This was it then. Freedom had lasted all of 2 hours. At least she would die as herself, not as Mrs. Ernest Caldwell. At least her father's fists would never find her again. The world faded to white, then to nothing. Warmth. That was the first thing Catherine became aware of, a steady heat against her skin that seemed impossible. She tried to open her eyes, but her lids were too heavy. Something soft covered her, and she was lying on something that was not snow. Voices drifted around her, muffled and indistinct. She was half frozen when I found her. Horse was about done for too. The voice was male, deep and steady, with a slight drawl that marked him as someone who had spent his life in the West. "You brought a stranger into your home, Ethan. Could be dangerous." This voice was older, rougher. "She's a girl, barely grown, and she was dying." What was I supposed to do, ride on by? Might have been the smarter choice. That's a nice horse she was riding, too nice for someone running around alone in a blizzard wearing a coat thin as paper. Someone's going to come looking. Then they'll find me instead of her. Catherine forced her eyes open. The room swam into focus slowly, revealing rough wooden walls, a stone fireplace with flames dancing in it, and 2 men standing near a table. The younger one was tall and broad-shouldered, probably in his mid-20s, with dark hair that fell almost to his collar and eyes that were somewhere between gray and blue. He wore a simple cotton shirt and dark trousers, and there was something solid about him, something that suggested he was not easily moved once he had planted himself. The older man was grizzled, with a beard more gray than brown and the weathered face of someone who had spent decades in the saddle. He noticed Catherine's open eyes first and nudged the younger man. "She's awake." Both men turned to look at her, and Catherine instinctively pulled the blankets tighter around herself. She was still wearing her dress, she realized with relief, though someone had removed her boots and coat. The younger man approached slowly, his hands visible and non-threatening. "Easy now. You're safe. I'm Ethan Holt. Found you about a mile from here, you and your horse both about to freeze solid. This is Charlie, my ranch hand." Catherine's throat was so dry she could barely speak. "The horse." "In my barn, being fed and watered. She'll be fine." Ethan grabbed a tin cup from the table and filled it with water from a pitcher. He held it out to her, staying at a respectful distance. "You want to tell me what you were doing out in that blizzard?" Catherine took the cup with shaking hands and drank deeply. The water was cold and clean, and it hurt going down her parched throat. She finished the entire cup before she spoke. "Running." "That much I figured. From what?" She looked at him properly then, trying to gauge whether he was the kind of man who would send her back or the kind who might understand. His face was hard to read, weather-worn despite his relative youth, but his eyes were not cruel. That counted for something. "My family," she said finally. "My father," Charlie snorted. "Family's family, can't just run from them." "You can if they're trying to sell you," Catherine shot back, and she was surprised by the strength in her own voice. Ethan's expression darkened. "Explain." So Catherine did. She told them about her father's debts, about the arrangement with Ernest Caldwell, about the years of her father's drinking and her mother's silent complicity. She told them about the bruises she had learned to hide, and the dreams she had never been allowed to voice. She did not cry as she spoke. She had no tears left for the Sullivans. When she finished, Charlie was looking at the floor and Ethan's jaw was tight. "They'll come looking for you," Ethan said. "A horse like that, someone's going to notice it missing." "I know." Catherine met his eyes. "I'll leave as soon as the storm passes. I won't bring trouble to your door." "Where will you go?" She had not thought that far ahead. "I don't know. Virginia City, maybe, or Helena. Somewhere I can find work." "Doing what?" "No offense, miss, but you don't look like you've done a hard day's work in your life," Catherine bristled. "I can learn. I can clean, I can cook, You can barely stand," Ethan interrupted. "And even if you make it to a city, you think your father won't send people looking?" "A young woman traveling alone is going to attract attention." "Then what do you suggest?" Catherine demanded. "Should I go back? Marry a man old enough to be my father and let my own father drink away whatever money he got for me?" Ethan was quiet for a long moment. Charlie cleared his throat. "Boss, you're not thinking what I think you're thinking." "Quiet, Charlie. Because that's a whole mess of trouble, and we've got enough on our hands with the ranch, and—" I said quiet. Ethan walked to the window and looked out at the still falling snow. "Storm like this will last another day at least. Your family won't be able to track you until it clears, and by then the snow will have covered your trail. That gives us time." "Time for what?" Catherine asked. Ethan turned back to face her. "To make you disappear. Your father's looking for his daughter, Catherine Sullivan. He's not looking for Ethan Holt, ranch wife." Catherine stared at him. "What? You need a new identity, protection from your family, and a reason to be here if anyone comes asking. Marriage solves all those problems." "You're suggesting we get married. We don't even know each other." "I'm not suggesting a love match," Ethan said, his voice matter of fact. "I'm suggesting a practical arrangement. You need somewhere safe, and I could use a wife." Charlie threw up his hands. "This is insane." "She's a stranger, Ethan. You don't know anything about her except what she's told you." "I know she was willing to die rather than be forced into something she didn't want. That tells me plenty." Ethan crossed his arms. "I'm not my brother, Charlie. I'm not going to hurt her." There was a story there, Catherine thought. Something painful in the way Ethan said the word brother. But before she could ask, Charlie was already heading for the door. "Fine. It's your life, your ranch. I'm going to check on the animals before this storm gets worse." He jammed his hat on his head and disappeared into the white wall of snow outside. Catherine and Ethan looked at each other in the sudden silence. "You don't have to do this," Catherine said quietly. "I'm grateful for your help, but I can't ask you to marry me just to keep me safe." "You're not asking. I'm offering." Ethan pulled a chair over and sat down, still maintaining that careful distance. "Let me tell you something about my situation. I'm 26 years old, and I've been running this ranch by myself for 3 years since my father died. My older brother left before that, took off for California with the woman I thought I was going to marry. Haven't heard from either of them since." Catherine winced. "I'm sorry." "Don't be. I got this place out of it, and I learned not to trust pretty words." He leaned forward, his elbows on his knees. "The thing is, ranching alone is hard. Most of the other ranchers around here have wives, families. I get passed over for contracts because people don't think a single man is reliable enough. And there are a couple of widows in town who have made it clear they're available, but they want things I can't give them. They want love stories and romance, and I've got nothing but work and more work." "So you want a business arrangement," Catherine said slowly. "I want someone who understands what this is. You need protection and a place to belong. I need help running this ranch and a wife in name to make my life easier. We both get something we need, and nobody has to pretend it's something it's not." It was possibly the least romantic proposal Catherine had ever imagined, and yet there was something appealing about its honesty. Ethan was not pretending to love her, was not making promises he could not keep. He was offering her a straightforward trade, and after a lifetime of her father's lies and manipulations, that clarity was almost refreshing. "What would you expect from me?" she asked. "Help around the house and ranch when you're able, appearing with me in town as my wife, making it look real. Sharing this space without making it unbearable for either of us." He paused. "We'd have separate rooms, I wouldn't expect. I mean, the marriage would be real legally, but we could keep it practical in all other ways." Catherine looked around the cabin, at the solid walls and the warm fire. She thought about her father's house, cold even when the stove was lit, filled with anger and silence. She thought about Ernest Caldwell and his yellow teeth. Then she looked back at Ethan Holt, this stranger who had pulled her from the snow and was now offering her something she had never had before, a choice. "All right," she said. "I'll marry you." Ethan nodded, his expression unchanging. "I'll ride to town when the storm clears and fetch the preacher. Until then, you should rest. You're still recovering." He stood and headed toward what Catherine assumed was his bedroom. At the doorway, he paused and looked back at her. "For what it's worth," he said, "I'm not your father and I'm not the man you were running from. You'll be safe here, I give you my word." "Why are you doing this?" Catherine asked. "Really?" Ethan was quiet for a moment. "My mother ran away once when I was a boy. My father drank, got mean with his hands. She made it as far as Bannack before he found her and dragged her back. She never tried again, and she died before she turned 40. I always wondered what would have happened if someone had helped her, if someone had given her a chance." He met Catherine's eyes. "I can't help her now, but I can help you." Then he was gone, disappearing into the other room, and Catherine was left alone with her thoughts and the crackling fire. The storm raged for 2 more days. During that time, Catherine learned the geography of Ethan's ranch, a modest spread about 5 miles outside of Bannack proper. The cabin had 3 rooms: the main living area with the kitchen and fireplace, Ethan's bedroom, and a smaller room that had been used for storage but which Ethan cleared out for Catherine. Charlie lived in a smaller cabin about 100 yards away, near the barn. The ranch itself consisted of about 200 acres, with a small herd of cattle and a handful of horses. It was not a grand operation, but it was self-sufficient, and Ethan clearly took pride in it. Catherine watched him work from the window, marveling at his efficiency. He was not a man who wasted motion or words. On the second day, when Catherine was feeling stronger, she attempted to make herself useful. She found supplies in the kitchen and started to prepare a meal, something simple with salt pork and beans. When Ethan came in from feeding the animals, he stopped in the doorway, surprise crossing his face. "You didn't have to do that," he said. "I need to start earning my keep," Catherine replied, stirring the pot over the fire. "Besides, I can't just sit around doing nothing. I'll lose my mind." Ethan hung his coat by the door and sat down at the table. "You grew up with money, I can tell. You sure you want to tie yourself to a life like this? It's going to be hard work, every day." "I grew up with the appearance of money," Catherine corrected. "My father spent every cent we had on whiskey and card games. I know how to make do with little, Mr. Holt. If we're getting married, you should probably call me Ethan." "Ethan," Catherine repeated, testing the name, "and you should call me Catherine." "Catherine." He said it carefully, as if committing it to memory. "It suits you." They ate in comfortable silence, and Catherine found herself studying him when she thought he was not looking. Ethan Holt was not a handsome man in the conventional sense. His features were too rough, his face too weathered by sun and wind. But there was something compelling about him, a quiet strength that made her feel safer than she had in years. After dinner, Ethan pulled out a ledger and began going over the ranch accounts. Catherine cleaned up and then, on impulse, sat down across from him. "Can I ask you something?" she said. "Go ahead." "What happened to your brother? You mentioned him before, but you didn't say much." Ethan's pen stopped moving. For a moment, Catherine thought he would not answer, but then he sighed and set the pen down. "Marcus was 3 years older than me and my father's favorite. He could do no wrong in the old man's eyes. When our father started drinking after our mother died, Marcus was the golden child who could handle him, while I was just the spare son who never quite measured up." Ethan's voice was flat, reciting facts without emotion. "When I was 23, I got engaged to a woman named Sarah Reed. Pretty girl from town, daughter of the general store owner. I thought we were happy. What happened? Marcus happened. He convinced her that he was the better prospect, that he was going to strike it rich in California. He always had a way with words, could charm anyone into anything. They left together one night, took my father's best horse and the money we had saved for winter supplies. My father had a stroke 2 weeks later. Died angry at me for letting them go, as if I could have stopped it." Catherine reached across the table and placed her hand over his. It was an impulsive gesture, one she regretted immediately when Ethan looked up at her in surprise. She started to pull away, but he turned his hand over and gently squeezed her fingers. "I'm sorry," she said quietly. "That's a terrible betrayal." "It taught me not to trust pretty words," Ethan said, "and not to expect too much from people. That's why I appreciate honesty, Catherine. I'd rather have someone tell me hard truths than sweet lies." "Then I'll be honest with you," Catherine said. "I'm scared. I'm scared my father will find me, that this won't work, that I'll be a burden to you. But I'm more scared of going back to who I was. So whatever this arrangement is, whatever it needs to be, I'll make it work. I promise you that." Ethan studied her face for a long moment, then nodded. "That's all I need to hear." The storm broke on the third day, leaving the world covered in fresh snow that sparkled under a weak winter sun. Ethan saddled his horse and rode to town, returning several hours later with a thin man in black who introduced himself as Reverend Thomas Perry. "I have to say, Ethan, this is rather sudden," the Reverend said, eyeing Catherine with undisguised curiosity. "I don't recall you courting anyone." Catherine's family is from back east, Ethan said smoothly. We've been corresponding for over a year. She came out to marry me, but the storm caught her on the way from Virginia City. Lucky I found her when I did. The lie came so easily that Catherine almost believed it herself. The Reverend seemed satisfied, though, and set about the business of marriage with professional efficiency. Charlie stood as witness, looking uncomfortable in a clean shirt, and within 20 minutes Catherine Sullivan became Ethan Holt. There was no kiss, no celebration. The Reverend accepted his fee, declined an offer to stay for dinner, and rode back toward town. Charlie mumbled something about checking the cattle and disappeared, and Catherine stood in the middle of the cabin, a married woman, feeling no different than she had an hour before. "Well," Ethan said, breaking the silence, "that's done." "Yes," Catherine agreed, "that's done." They looked at each other awkwardly, and for the first time since she had met him, Catherine saw uncertainty in Ethan's face. "I should make something for dinner," she said finally, needing something to do with her hands. "I'll help you." They worked side by side in the small kitchen, and Catherine found herself acutely aware of every time their hands brushed or their shoulders touched in the confined space. It was strange, this sudden intimacy with a man who was legally her husband, but still essentially a stranger. And yet, it was not entirely unpleasant. Over the next few weeks, they fell into a routine. Ethan rose before dawn to tend the animals, and Catherine made breakfast. They worked through the day, Ethan outside and Catherine learning the rhythms of the household. She discovered that she was better at this life than she had expected. She took to cooking and cleaning with a determination that surprised even herself. And she found satisfaction in creating order and comfort in their small space. Ethan was a patient teacher when she asked to learn about the ranch operations. He showed her how to feed the chickens, how to milk the cow, how to recognize when an animal was sick. He never spoke down to her or made her feel foolish for not knowing things. He simply showed her, let her practice, and moved on. At night, they sat by the fire, Ethan reading or working on his accounts while Catherine mended clothes or read from the few books he owned. They talked, sometimes about small things, the weather, the animals, the neighbors. They did not talk about the past or the future, staying safely in the present. It was during one of these quiet evenings, about a month after their marriage, that Catherine looked up from her mending and caught Ethan watching her. He looked away immediately, but not before she saw something in his expression that had not been there before, interest perhaps, or curiosity. "What is it?" she asked. "Nothing. I was just thinking that you look different than when you first arrived." "Different how?" "Healthier. Happier, maybe." He shrugged. "You were so pale and thin when I found you. Now there's color in your face." Catherine set down her mending. "I am happier. This life, this place, it's nothing like what I imagined for myself, but it's mine in a way nothing ever was before. Does that make sense?" "Yeah," Ethan said quietly. "It does." Something shifted between them in that moment, something subtle but significant. They were not strangers anymore, Catherine realized. They were not quite friends either, but they were something, some new category that did not have a name yet. The first real test of their arrangement came in early February, when Thomas Sullivan rode into the ranch yard with 3 other men. Catherine was in the kitchen when she heard the horses, and she looked out the window to see her father's face, red and angry even in the cold. Terror seized her, primal and immediate, and she stumbled backward. Ethan was in the barn, but Charlie came running from the cattle shed, and moments later Ethan emerged. Catherine watched through the window as her father dismounted and began shouting. She could not hear the words, but she could see Ethan's response. Calm, unmoved, his body language radiating a quiet authority. Her father got louder, gesturing wildly, and one of the men with him put a hand on his gun. Catherine's heart stopped, but Ethan did not flinch. He said something, pointed back toward the cabin, and then walked deliberately toward the house. Her father started to follow, but Charlie stepped in his path, and there was something about the old ranch hand's posture that made Thomas Sullivan stop. The door opened, and Ethan came inside. His face was composed, but Catherine could see tension in his shoulders. "Your father's here," he said unnecessarily. "He knows you're alive. Someone in town saw you with the Reverend and sent word." "What does he want?" "You, naturally." "He says you're his daughter and you belong with your family. I told him you're my wife now and you've made your choice." Catherine gripped the edge of the table. "He won't accept that. I know. That's why you need to tell him yourself. He needs to see that you're here willingly." "Ethan, you don't understand. I'll be right beside you," Ethan interrupted. "He can't hurt you anymore, Catherine, but you need to face him. Otherwise, he'll never stop." Catherine wanted to refuse, to hide, to run. But she looked at Ethan's steady gaze and found strength she did not know she possessed. She nodded. They walked outside together, and Catherine forced herself to look at her father. Thomas Sullivan looked older than she remembered, his face more lined, his body thinner. But his eyes held the same mean light they always had. "Catherine," he said, his voice mockingly gentle, "there you are. We've been so worried. Come home now and we'll forget this foolishness." "I am home," Catherine said, and she was proud that her voice did not shake. "This is my home now." "I'm married, Father. The marriage to Mr. Caldwell is impossible." "Married?" Thomas spat on the ground. "To some dirt farmer you just met. Don't be stupid, girl. You're coming back with me and we'll sort this out." "She's not going anywhere," Ethan said quietly. "Catherine made her choice. You need to respect it. This isn't your business, boy. That's my daughter. That's my wife, and I'm telling you to leave my property." Thomas Sullivan's face turned purple. "You think you can steal a man's daughter and get away with it? I'll have the law on you. Go ahead," Ethan said. "Sheriff Plummer knows we're married. Got the certificate on file at the courthouse. There's nothing illegal about a woman choosing her own husband. She was promised to Ernest Caldwell. There was an agreement you made, not her." Ethan's voice remained calm, but there was steel underneath. "Now you can leave peacefully, or I can have you removed. Your choice." One of the men with Thomas reached for his gun, but Charlie was faster, his own weapon already drawn. The yard went very still. "Think carefully," Charlie said conversationally. "Because if someone starts shooting, it's not going to end well for you." Catherine stepped forward, standing shoulder to shoulder with Ethan. "Father, I'm not coming back. Not now, not ever. You can accept that, or you can waste your time trying to change it, but the result will be the same. I'm done being afraid of you." Thomas Sullivan stared at his daughter, and Catherine stared back, refusing to drop her gaze. She saw the moment he realized he had lost, saw the fury and impotence flash across his face. He turned and spat again, this time narrowly missing Catherine's skirt. "You're dead to me," he snarled. "You hear me? You're no daughter of mine." "Good," Catherine said simply. "That's exactly what I want." Her father mounted his horse with jerky, angry movements. "You'll regret this. Both of you. That bastard Caldwell is going to want his money back, and when I can't pay him, he's going to come looking for satisfaction. You've made enemies today." "Then they'll have to get in line," Ethan said. "Good day, Mr. Sullivan." Thomas wheeled his horse around and rode off, his companions following. Catherine watched until they disappeared from sight, and then her legs gave out. Ethan caught her before she hit the ground, his arms strong and steady around her. "I've got you," he murmured. "You're all right. You did so well, Catherine." She clung to him, shaking with reaction, and felt his hand stroking her hair. It was the first time he had held her, the first real physical affection between them, and Catherine found herself pressing closer, drawing strength from his solid presence. "He's really gone," she whispered. "He's really gone. And he's not coming back." Charlie holstered his gun and walked over. That could have gone worse, but the old man's right about one thing: Caldwell's going to be a problem. "Let him come," Ethan said. "We'll deal with it." But his arms tightened around Catherine, and she realized with a start that he was worried. Ernest Caldwell was a wealthy man with influence and resources. If he decided to make trouble, he could make a lot of it. For the moment, though, Catherine allowed herself to feel safe in her husband's arms, to breathe in the scent of him, leather and horses and honest work. When she finally pulled back, Ethan's hands lingered on her arms. "Thank you," she said, "for standing with me." "I'm your family now," Ethan said, and the words resonated through Catherine like a bell. "That means something to me. It means I'll stand with you always." Catherine reached up and touched his face, her fingers tracing the rough stubble on his jaw. Ethan went very still, his eyes searching hers. For a moment, Catherine thought he might kiss her, and she realized she wanted him to. But then Charlie cleared his throat awkwardly, and the spell broke. "I should get back to the cattle," Charlie muttered, walking away quickly. Ethan stepped back, and Catherine dropped her hand, both of them suddenly unsure. But something had changed. Some line had been crossed. They were not just business partners anymore. That night, Catherine lay in her small room and listened to the sounds of the ranch settling around her. She heard Ethan moving around in his room, heard the creak of his bed as he lay down. She thought about his arms around her, about the way he had defended her without hesitation. She thought about the words he had spoken. "I'm your family now." She had married him for protection, for safety, for escape. But somewhere in the past 6 weeks, her feelings had begun to shift into something more complicated. She found herself looking forward to their evenings by the fire, to the small moments of connection they shared. She noticed the way his face softened when he smiled, rare as those smiles were. She appreciated his steady competence, his quiet kindness, the way he treated her like an equal rather than property. Catherine had not been looking for love when she fled into that blizzard. She had been looking for freedom. But now, lying in the dark, she wondered if she might have found both. Spring came slowly to Montana, the snow melting in reluctant patches to reveal the brown earth beneath. As the weather warmed, the work on the ranch intensified. Calving season kept Ethan and Charlie busy day and night, and Catherine found herself taking on more responsibilities. She learned to handle the horses, coaxing the more temperamental ones with patience and soft words. She learned to spot signs of illness in the cattle, to help with difficult births, to mend fences and haul water. Her hands grew calloused, her arms stronger. She was becoming someone new, or perhaps someone she had always been underneath the layers of fear and submission her father had imposed. Ethan noticed. He praised her work, relied on her judgment, included her in decisions about the ranch. They became a team, partners in truth as well as name. And with each passing day, Catherine felt the connection between them growing stronger. It was in late April, during a rare moment of rest, that things finally changed between them. They had been working together to repair a section of the barn roof, and Catherine lost her footing on the ladder. She would have fallen if Ethan had not caught her, his arms wrapping around her waist and pulling her against him. "Careful," he said, but his voice was rough, different than usual. Catherine turned in his arms, and suddenly they were face to face, their bodies pressed together on the narrow ladder. She saw the way Ethan's eyes darkened, the way his gaze dropped to her lips. "Ethan," she whispered, and it was both a question and an invitation. He kissed her then, finally, his mouth claiming hers with a hunger that took her breath away. Catherine responded instinctively, her arms winding around his neck, her fingers tangling in his hair. The kiss deepened, and Catherine felt heat flooding through her body, a wanting she had never experienced before. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Ethan rested his forehead against hers. "I've wanted to do that for weeks," he confessed. "But I wasn't sure if you wanted the same thing." "I do," Catherine said. "I want this, I want you." "This changes things," Ethan said. "If we do this, Catherine, it stops being just an arrangement, it becomes real. Is that what you want?" Catherine thought about the past few months, about the life they had built together, about the man Ethan had proven himself to be. She thought about how she felt when he smiled at her, when he said her name, when he stood beside her against her father. "It already is real," she said. "It's been real for a while now. I just didn't want to admit it because I was afraid. Afraid you didn't feel the same way, afraid to want something and lose it." Ethan cupped her face in his hands, his thumbs stroking her cheeks. "I'm not going anywhere, and I'm not my brother, Catherine. I don't make promises I can't keep. If you're mine forever. That's how I do things." "Then I'm yours," Catherine said, "and you're mine." They kissed again, softer this time but no less intense, and when they climbed down from the ladder, Ethan took her hand and led her back to the cabin. The rest of the afternoon was spent in Ethan's room, learning each other with hands and mouths and whispered words, consummating their marriage in truth and claiming each other completely. Afterward, lying tangled in Ethan's bed with her head on his chest, Catherine felt a peace she had never known before. This was what love was supposed to be, she realized. Not her father's brutal dominance or the hollow transaction she had almost been forced into with Ernest Caldwell. This was partnership, respect, desire freely given and received. "I love you," she said, testing the words. They felt strange in her mouth, but right. Ethan's arms tightened around her. "I love you too. Probably have for a while now, if I'm being honest." "When did you know?" "The day your father came. When you stood up to him, refused to be afraid, I saw your strength and I thought, this is the woman I want beside me for the rest of my life. Not because I need her, but because I choose her." He pressed a kiss to the top of her head. "What about you?" "I think it was gradual," Catherine said thoughtfully. "Little moments adding up. The way you made me coffee in the morning, the way you taught me things without making me feel stupid, the way you looked at me like I mattered. I married you for safety, but I fell in love with you because of who you are." They lay together as the sun set, talking and touching, making plans for a future that suddenly seemed full of possibility. When Charlie rang the dinner bell, a signal they had established, so he would not accidentally interrupt anything, they dressed reluctantly and emerged from the bedroom with flushed faces and tangled hair. Charlie took one look at them and grinned. "About damn time. I was starting to think you two were never going to figure it out." "You knew?" Catherine asked, embarrassed. "Honey, everyone with eyes could see the way you two looked at each other, like a couple of lovesick calves." Charlie laughed at their expressions. "Don't worry, I'm happy for you. Ethan deserves some happiness, and you seem to fit each other well enough." They ate dinner together, the three of them, and the conversation was easy and warm. Catherine felt like she was finally part of something, a real family built on choice rather than obligation. It was everything she had never known she wanted. But happiness, Catherine was learning, was a fragile thing. 2 weeks later, Ernest Caldwell arrived in Bannack, and with him came trouble. Catherine was in town with Ethan, picking up supplies, when a well-dressed man in his 50s approached them outside the general store. She recognized him immediately from the few times he had visited her father's house, and her stomach clenched. "So this is the little bride," Caldwell said, his voice oily with false charm. "Catherine Sullivan, who cost me a great deal of money and embarrassment." "Ethan Holt," Ethan corrected, stepping slightly in front of his wife. And she didn't cost you anything. Any arrangement you had was with her father, not her. A minor distinction. I paid good money for a bride, and I expect to receive what I was promised. I'm not property, Catherine said, her voice steady despite her racing heart. And I'm already married. Caldwell's smile was unpleasant. Marriages can be annulled. Contracts can be enforced. I'm a patient man, Mrs. Holt, but I will have satisfaction one way or another. If not a bride, then monetary compensation for my loss. And if your father cannot pay, then I'll collect from his daughter instead. You'll collect nothing, Ethan said flatly. Catherine owes you nothing. Now leave us alone. Or what? You'll defend her honor, Caldwell laughed. I have lawyers, Mr. Holt. I have friends in the territorial government. I can make your life very difficult if I choose. Then choose, Ethan said. See how far it gets you. Caldwell's eyes narrowed. You're making a mistake, but I'm a businessman, so I'll make you an offer. Give me $3,000 and I'll consider the matter settled. You can keep your little bride and I'll go back to Virginia City. $3,000, Ethan repeated. For what? The privilege of my wife not being sold to you. You can go to hell. Think about it, Caldwell said. You have 1 week. Otherwise, I start making trouble, and I promise you I'm very good at that. He walked away, leaving Catherine and Ethan standing in the street. Catherine was shaking with anger and fear. $3,000, she said numbly. We don't have that kind of money. I know. Ethan took her hand. But we're not giving him a cent. He has no legal claim to you, Catherine. He's just trying to bully us. He has power and connections. He can hurt us. Let him try. But Catherine saw the worry in Ethan's eyes, and she knew he was not as confident as he sounded. $3,000 was more money than they would see in years. And men like Ernest Caldwell did not make empty threats. That night, lying in bed with Ethan's arms around her, Catherine made a decision. I'll talk to him, she said. I'll explain that we can't pay, that threatening us is pointless. No, Ethan said immediately. You're not going anywhere near that man. He'll listen to me. Maybe if I appeal to his sense of reason. Men like that don't have reason. They have ego and greed, and nothing you say will change his mind. Ethan turned Catherine to face him. Promise me you won't try to contact him. Promise me, Catherine. She promised, but even as she did, she was planning. She could not let Ernest Caldwell destroy everything she and Ethan had built. If talking to him might help, she had to try. 2 days later, when Ethan was occupied with a difficult horse and Charlie was out checking the fence line, Catherine saddled a mare and rode to town. She found Ernest Caldwell in the saloon, holding court with several men who looked like they made their living with guns rather than honest work. Mrs. Holt, Caldwell said when he saw her. What a pleasant surprise. Come to accept my generous offer. I've come to ask you to leave us alone, Catherine said, forcing herself to stay calm. Whatever arrangement you had with my father has nothing to do with me or my husband. We can't pay you $3,000, and you have no legal right to demand it. Caldwell stood and walked toward her, and Catherine had to fight the urge to back away. You know, you're even prettier up close. I can see why your father thought you were worth the investment. It's a shame things turned out this way. Mr. Caldwell, the thing is, my dear, this isn't really about the money. It's about respect. Your father made a fool of me backing out of our agreement. You made a fool of me running off and marrying some dirt farmer. I can't allow that to stand. Then what do you want? Caldwell smiled. I want you to suffer just a little. I want your husband to know what it feels like to lose something precious. And then, when you're both desperate and broken, maybe I'll consider mercy. Catherine felt ice in her veins. You're insane. I'm powerful. There's a difference. Caldwell gestured to his men. Now, I think it's time you went home, Mrs. Holt, and you can tell your husband that his week is almost up. Catherine turned to leave, but one of Caldwell's men blocked her path. "Not so fast. The boss didn't say you could go yet." Panic flared, but before things could escalate further, the saloon doors swung open and Ethan walked in, his face like thunder. Behind him was Charlie and, surprisingly, Sheriff John Plummer. "Step away from my wife," Ethan said, his voice deadly quiet. Caldwell's man looked to his employer, who nodded lazily. "Let her go. For now." Catherine ran to Ethan, who pulled her close. The sheriff stepped forward, his hand resting on his gun. "Mr. Caldwell, I've been hearing some interesting things about you threatening upstanding citizens in my town," Plummer said. "Care to explain?" "Just a business discussion, Sheriff. Nothing to concern yourself with." "See, that's where you're wrong. When men start gathering hired guns and making threats, it becomes my concern." Plummer's eyes were hard. "I'm going to give you some advice, Mr. Caldwell. Whatever issue you think you have with the Holts, you let it go. You pack up your men and you go back to Virginia City. Because if there's any trouble, any at all, I'm going to assume you're the cause and I'm going to respond accordingly. You're siding with them. Do you know who I am? I know exactly who you are. And I know the Holts are honest people trying to make an honest living. That counts for more in my book than money or connections." Plummer tipped his hat to Catherine. "Madam, let's get you home." They left the saloon, Catherine clinging to Ethan's arm. Once they were outside, Ethan turned to the sheriff. "Thank you, John. We appreciate you stepping in." "Just doing my job. But Ethan, you need to be careful. Caldwell's dangerous and he's not going to let this go easily." "I know, but what else can we do? Watch your back. And if anything happens, you send for me immediately, you hear?" They promised they would, and the sheriff headed back to his office. Ethan turned to Catherine, and she saw a mixture of relief and anger in his face. "You promised me you wouldn't contact him," he said. "I know. I'm sorry. I just thought if I could reason with him, reason with him." "Catherine, he could have hurt you. Do you understand that? He could have taken you, or worse, and I might not have gotten there in time. I was trying to help. I can't just stand by and let him threaten everything we have." They were both shouting now, the fear and tension of the past days boiling over. Charlie discreetly made himself scarce, leading the horses away. "You help by staying safe." Ethan grabbed her shoulders. "Do you think I could survive losing you? After everything, after finally finding something real and good, do you think I could handle it if something happened to you?" Catherine saw the fear underlying his anger, the vulnerability he rarely showed. Her own anger drained away, replaced by understanding. "I'm sorry," she said, softer now. "You're right. I was foolish. But Ethan, I feel the same way. The thought of Ernest Caldwell destroying what we've built, hurting you, it terrifies me. I had to do something." Ethan pulled her into his arms, holding her so tightly she could barely breathe. "We face this together. No more running off alone, no more trying to fix things by yourself. We're a team, remember? That means we protect each other." "Together," Catherine agreed, her face pressed against his chest. "I promise." They stood there in the street, holding each other, until Charlie discreetly coughed to get their attention. "Hate to interrupt, but we should probably get back to the ranch. No telling what Caldwell might try next." The ride home was tense, all of them watching for signs of trouble. But they made it back without incident, and the next few days passed quietly. Too quietly, Catherine thought. She could not shake the feeling that they were waiting for the other shoe to drop. It dropped a week later in the form of fire. Catherine woke in the middle of the night to the smell of smoke. She stumbled out of bed, her heart pounding, and ran to wake Ethan. He was already up, pulling on his boots. "The barn," he said grimly. "It's on fire." They ran outside to find the barn fully engulfed, flames licking toward the night sky. The horses inside were screaming, and Catherine's heart broke at the sound. Ethan ran toward the barn doors, but Charlie grabbed him. "It's too far gone, boss. You'll die if you go in there." "The horses are already dead," Charlie said brutally. "But we can save the cabin if we work fast." They spent the next hours fighting the fire, hauling water and beating back flames that tried to jump to the other buildings. By the time the sun rose, the barn was a smoking ruin and they were all covered in ash and soot. But the cabin and Charlie's house were safe, and the cattle, grazing in the far pasture, were unharmed. Ethan stood looking at the ruins of the barn, his face expressionless. Catherine knew he was calculating the loss. 4 horses, all their hay, most of their tools and tack. It was a devastating blow to the ranch, one that might take years to recover from. "Caldwell," Catherine said, and it was not a question. "Probably. But we can't prove it." Ethan's voice was flat, exhausted. "He wins. We can't afford to rebuild, can't replace what we lost. We'll have to sell the ranch, try to start over somewhere else." "No," Catherine said fiercely. "We're not letting him win. There has to be another way." But as the days passed and the reality of their situation sank in, Catherine's determination began to waver. Ethan worked from dawn until long after dark, trying to salvage what he could and keep the ranch running with almost no equipment. Charlie did the same, neither man complaining but both clearly stretched to their limits. Catherine helped where she could, but she felt helpless. This was her fault in a way. If she had never run away, if she had never come to this ranch, Ethan would still have his barn, his horses, his future. She was in the ruins of the barn, picking through the ashes for anything salvageable, when she heard a horse approaching. She looked up to see a woman in her 40s, well-dressed and riding a fine mare. The woman dismounted and approached Catherine with a friendly smile. "You must be Ethan Holt. I'm Margaret Reed from the neighboring ranch. I heard about the fire." Catherine recognized the last name. "Any relation to Sarah Reed?" Margaret's smile faltered. "My daughter. I take it Ethan told you about her and Marcus." "A bit. I'm sorry for what happened." "So am I." Sarah was young and foolish, and Marcus Holt was charming and persuasive. She realized her mistake about 6 months after they left, but by then it was too late. He'd abandoned her in Sacramento, took all her money and disappeared. Margaret shook her head. "She came home last year, broken and ashamed. She's married now to a good man in Helena, but it took her a long time to trust again." Catherine did not know what to say. She had assumed Sarah was living happily in California with Marcus, not that she had been used and abandoned. "I didn't come here to talk about the past, though," Margaret continued. "I came to offer help. I know the fire has put you and Ethan in a difficult position. My husband and I would like to loan you the money to rebuild. No interest, and you can pay us back when you're able." Catherine stared at her. "Why would you do that? After what happened with Sarah and Ethan, that's exactly why. Ethan is a good man who was badly hurt by my daughter's choices. He deserves a chance at happiness, and from what I hear around town, he's found it with you." Margaret smiled. "Besides, neighbors help neighbors. That's how we survive out here." Tears pricked Catherine's eyes. "I don't know what to say. Thank you seems inadequate. Thank you is perfect. Now let's go talk to your husband and work out the details." Ethan was suspicious at first when Margaret made her offer, but she was insistent, and eventually he agreed. With the loan, they could rebuild the barn, buy new horses, replace their tools. The ranch would survive. That night, lying in bed with Catherine, Ethan was quiet for a long time. "I thought we were done," he finally said. "I thought Caldwell had destroyed us." "We're not that easy to destroy," Catherine said. "We're stronger than he is because we have something he doesn't. We have people who care about us, people willing to help, and we have each other." Ethan turned to face her, his hand cupping her cheek. "I meant what I said before. You're my family, Catherine, the only family that matters, Everything I do, everything I build, it's for you, for us. I love you, Catherine said, more than I ever thought possible. You saved me, Ethan, in every way a person can be saved. You saved me too, he said. I was just going through the motions before you came, existing but not really living. You gave me a reason to hope again, to want more than just survival. They made love then, slow and sweet, reaffirming their connection. And when Catherine fell asleep in Ethan's arms, she felt a certainty that whatever challenges came, they would face them together. Ernest Caldwell left town 2 days later. Sheriff Plummer informed them that he had been asking around for men to help him with a job, and the sheriff had made it very clear that such activities would not be tolerated. Caldwell had apparently decided that Catherine was not worth the trouble after all. He'll go find some other woman to torment, Plummer said. Men like that always do. But he's done with you folks, I think. He knows he can't win here. Catherine felt relief wash through her. It was over. Finally, truly over. The spring turned to summer, and the new barn rose from the ashes of the old. The entire community turned out to help with the building. Neighbors Catherine had never met bringing tools and supplies and willing hands. She realized that this was what Ethan had meant when he said they were stronger together. They were part of something larger than themselves, a web of connections that supported them all. Catherine found herself making friends among the ranch wives, women who welcomed her with open arms once they realized she was one of them now, someone willing to work hard and contribute to the community. She learned to can vegetables, to trade recipes, to offer help when others needed it. And her relationship with Ethan deepened, growing richer with every passing day. They were true partners now, in work and in love. They knew each other's moods, anticipated each other's needs, found joy in the simple act of being together. In late August, Catherine realized she had missed her monthly courses. She waited another month to be sure, then went to see the doctor in Bannack. When he confirmed what she suspected, Catherine rode home in a daze, one hand pressed to her still flat stomach. She found Ethan in the new barn brushing down one of their horses. He looked up when she entered, and his smile made her heart skip. "You're back. How was town?" "Interesting," Catherine said. "I have news." Something in her tone made Ethan set down the brush and give her his full attention. "What kind of news?" "The kind where we need to start thinking about adding another room to the cabin. Maybe 2 eventually." It took Ethan a moment to understand, but when he did, his face transformed with joy. "You're pregnant. We're going to have a baby. Probably in late February or early March." Ethan crossed the distance between them in 3 strides and lifted Catherine off her feet, spinning her around while she laughed. When he set her down, he was grinning like a fool. "A baby," he said, wonder in his voice. "We're going to have a baby." "Are you happy?" Catherine asked, suddenly uncertain. "Happy, Catherine, I'm beyond happy. I'm overwhelmed. I'm terrified. I'm every possible emotion at once." He pulled her close, his hand resting on her stomach. "We're going to be parents. We're going to have a family." "We already are a family," Catherine said. "But yes, it's going to get bigger." They told Charlie that night over dinner, and the old ranch hand actually teared up. "About time this place had some new life in it. Your mama would have been so proud, Ethan." "I wish she could have met Catherine," Ethan said quietly. "I think they would have liked each other." "She would have loved Catherine," Charlie said firmly. "Anyone can see you two are meant for each other." The pregnancy was not easy. Catherine was sick for the first 3 months, barely able to keep anything down. Ethan fretted over her constantly, trying to tempt her with different foods and making sure she rested. As winter approached, he became even more protective, insisting she stay inside when the weather turned cold. "I'm pregnant, not made of glass," Catherine protested after he refused to let her help with the outdoor chores for the third day in a row. "Your precious cargo," Ethan countered, "and I'm not taking any chances, not after everything we went through to get here." Catherine could not really argue with that. She had nearly died in a blizzard less than a year ago, and now she was carrying their child. It seemed almost impossible that so much could change in such a short time. The baby came early, on a frigid night in February during a snowstorm that reminded Catherine uncomfortably of the storm she had fled into. But this time, she was safe and warm inside her cabin, with Ethan holding her hand and the doctor and Margaret Reed helping with the delivery. It was long and painful, and there were moments when Catherine thought she could not continue. But then she would hear Ethan's voice, steady and encouraging, reminding her that she was strong, that she could do this, that he was there with her, and she would find the strength to push again. When the baby finally emerged, squalling and red-faced, Catherine collapsed back against the pillows in exhausted relief. The doctor cleaned the infant and placed it on Catherine's chest. "It's a boy," he announced, "strong and healthy." Catherine looked down at her son, at his tiny, perfect face and waving fists, and felt a love so fierce it took her breath away. Ethan leaned over them both, tears streaming down his face. "He's perfect," Ethan whispered. "You did so well, Catherine. You're amazing." "We did it," Catherine corrected. "We made him together." They named him Thomas, after Ethan's grandfather rather than Catherine's father, and James for a middle name. Thomas James Holt made his opinions known from the start, crying lustily when he was hungry or wet or simply wanted attention. Catherine was exhausted and sore and had never been happier in her life. Ethan was a devoted father from the first moment, taking to parenthood with the same quiet competence he brought to everything else. He changed diapers without complaint, walked the floor with Thomas during the long nights, and looked at his son with such obvious adoration that Catherine fell in love with him all over again. "I never thought I'd have this," Ethan said one night, holding Thomas while Catherine rested. "After Sarah left, after my father died, I thought I was done with the idea of family. I was just going to work this ranch alone until I died. And then you stumbled into my life, half frozen and stubborn as hell, and everything changed." "I never thought I'd have this either," Catherine said. "I thought family meant pain and control and fear, but you showed me what it's supposed to be, love and partnership and choosing to stand together." "I'm your family now," Ethan said, echoing the words he had spoken on the day Catherine's father had come. "And you're mine, and now we have Thomas. We're building something real here, Catherine, something that's going to last." As spring came again to Montana, bringing with it the promise of new beginnings, Catherine often found herself reflecting on the journey that had brought her here. She had fled into a blizzard expecting to die, and instead she had found life real, full, joyful life. The ranch prospered. With hard work and the continued support of their neighbors, Ethan and Catherine paid off the loan from the Reeds and began to build savings. They added onto the cabin, creating more space for their growing family. Thomas thrived, growing into a bright, curious toddler who followed his father around the ranch like a shadow. Catherine's mother came to visit once, a year after Thomas was born. She came alone, thinner and grayer than Catherine remembered, and she cried when she saw her daughter. "I'm sorry," Ethan Sullivan said. "I'm so sorry I didn't protect you, didn't stand up for you. I was weak, and you suffered for it." Catherine wanted to be angry, wanted to turn her mother away. But when she looked at Ethan, she saw only a broken woman who had been a victim in her own way. So she forgave her, and she let her mother meet her grandson, and she watched as Ethan's face softened with wonder. "He looks like you did as a baby," Ethan whispered, holding Thomas. "Happy and loved. I'm glad you found that, Catherine. I'm glad you're safe." Catherine's father never came, never tried to contact her. She heard through town gossip that he had drunk himself to death 2 winters after she left, alone and unmourned. She felt nothing when she heard the news, no grief or satisfaction. He was simply part of a past she had moved beyond. Ernest Caldwell, she learned, had been arrested in Virginia City for fraud. He died in prison, leaving behind debts and scandal. The man who had tried to destroy her life had destroyed his own instead. Years passed, measured in seasons and small joys. Catherine and Ethan had 2 more children, daughters they named Emma and Grace. The ranch grew and prospered, becoming one of the most successful operations in the territory. Charlie grew older but remained with them, becoming the children's beloved honorary grandfather. On a summer evening when Catherine was 30 years old, she sat on the porch of their expanded cabin and watched Ethan teaching Thomas, now 7 years old, how to rope a fence post. Emma and Grace played in the yard, their laughter rising into the warm air. The mountains stood purple and blue in the distance, and the sky was turning gold with sunset. Ethan finished the lesson and sent Thomas to practice on his own, then climbed the porch steps and sat beside Catherine. He took her hand, their fingers intertwining with the ease of long familiarity. "What are you thinking about?" he asked. "About that night in the snow," Catherine said. "About how I was so certain I was going to die and how instead I found you." "We found each other," Ethan corrected. "You saved me as much as I saved you, Catherine. Maybe more. Do you ever wonder what would have happened if the storm had gone a different direction, if you had been in a different part of the ranch that day?" "Sometimes. But then I remember that some things are meant to be. We were meant to find each other, to build this life together." He brought her hand to his lips and kissed it. "I told you once that you were my family. That's still true, and it always will be." Catherine leaned her head on his shoulder, feeling the solid warmth of him, watching their children play in the fading light. She thought about the girl she had been, terrified and desperate, fleeing into a blizzard because death seemed preferable to the life she had. That girl could never have imagined this future, this happiness, this abundance of love. But she had been brave enough to choose freedom, and in doing so, she had found everything she never knew she wanted. She had found a home, a purpose, a love that anchored her while setting her free. She had found Ethan, and in finding him, she had found herself. "I love you," she said, the words as easy as breathing now. "I love you too," Ethan replied. "Always have, always will." As the sun set over the Montana mountains and their children's laughter filled the air, Ethan Holt closed her eyes and smiled, at peace with the past and grateful for the present. The scars of her old life had faded, replaced by the beautiful complexity of the life she had built. She had escaped her family in the snow, and a cowboy had taken her in. He had become her family, and she had become his, and together they had created something neither could have built alone. It was not the life she had planned, but it was so much better than anything she had imagined. It was, quite simply, everything. Years continued to unfold, each one adding layers to the story of the Holt family. Thomas grew into a young man with his father's steady temperament and his mother's determination. He took naturally to ranching, and Ethan began teaching him the business with an eye toward the day Thomas would run the operation himself. Emma proved to have a gift with horses, gentling even the most difficult animals with patience and intuition. Grace was the scholar of the family, always with a book in hand, talking about becoming a teacher one day. Catherine watched her children grow with a mixture of pride and bittersweet awareness of time's passage. Each milestone they reached reminded her of how far she had come from that desperate girl in the snow. When Thomas turned 18 and Ethan officially made him a partner in the ranch, Catherine saw her husband's joy and knew he was thinking the same thing she was. They had broken the cycle of pain and created something better. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Ethan surprised Catherine by taking her to the spot where he had found her that winter night. The location was marked now by a young pine tree they had planted years before, its branches reaching toward the sky. "I wanted to come back here," Ethan said, "because this is where our life really started. I know we've celebrated the wedding anniversary, but this place, this moment when I found you, this is when everything changed." Catherine looked at the tree, remembering the fear and cold and desperate hope of that night. "I was so scared. I thought I was going to die, and part of me had accepted it. And then there you were, this stranger who looked at me like I was worth saving. You were worth saving. You are worth everything." Ethan pulled a small box from his pocket. "I never gave you a proper wedding ring. We were so focused on practicalities, on surviving, but I want you to have this." He opened the box to reveal a simple gold band with a small diamond. It was not extravagant, but Catherine could tell by the quality that Ethan had saved for it, that it represented sacrifice and thought. "It's beautiful," she whispered as he slipped it onto her finger. "It doesn't come close to representing what you mean to me," Ethan said. "But I wanted you to have something that shows the world you're mine, and I'm yours, and this is forever." Catherine threw her arms around him, and they held each other under the branches of the pine tree that marked both an ending and a beginning. When they finally pulled apart, Catherine touched the ring on her finger and smiled. "You remember what you said to me that day my father came?" she asked. "I'm your family now," Ethan quoted. "I meant it then and I mean it now." "Those words changed my life," Catherine said. "Because they told me that family is not about blood or obligation. It's about choice. You chose me and I chose you, and we chose this life. And I would make the same choice every single day for the rest of my life." They rode back to the ranch hand in hand, their horses moving in easy synchronization. The sunset painted the sky in shades of orange and pink, and in the distance, they could see the lights of their home beginning to glow. That night, with their children asleep and the house quiet, Catherine and Ethan sat by the fire as they had done countless times before. But this time, Catherine pulled out a journal she had been keeping, pages filled with her thoughts and memories. "I've been writing our story," she told Ethan. "For the children, for their children, so they'll know where we came from and what we built together." "What did you write?" Ethan asked, genuinely curious. "The truth. That I ran away from a family that saw me as property, that I nearly died in a blizzard, that you saved me and gave me a choice. I wrote about how we built this ranch together, how we fell in love, how we faced down the people who tried to hurt us. I wrote about the birth of our children and the life we've made." She handed the journal to Ethan, and he paged through it, reading passages here and there. When he looked up, his eyes were bright with unshed tears. "This is our legacy," he said. "Not just the ranch or the land, but this story. The story of how love can heal, how courage can change everything, how two broken people can make each other whole." "We're not broken anymore," Catherine said. "We're strong. We're complete. We're exactly who we were always meant to be." As the fire burned low and the night deepened around them, Catherine felt a profound sense of gratitude. She had been given a gift that night in the snow, the gift of a second chance, of a life worth living, of a love that sustained and enriched her. She had been escaping her family in the snow when Ethan Holt found her. He had taken her in and said, "I'm your family now," and those 5 words had been more than a promise. They had been a prophecy, a truth that unfolded over years of laughter and tears, hard work and quiet joy. Catherine Holt was no longer the frightened girl who had stolen a horse and ridden into a blizzard. She was a woman who had built a life of meaning and purpose, A wife and mother and partner, someone who knew her own worth and protected it fiercely. She was someone who had learned that family was not something you were born into, but something you created, one choice at a time. And as she sat beside the man who had become her family, her home, her heart, Catherine knew that she had found something more precious than safety or survival. She had found belonging. She had found love. She had found herself. The snow had tried to kill her, but instead it had delivered her to the exact place she needed to be, into the arms of the exact person she needed to meet. And in the end, that cold Montana blizzard had been the beginning of the warmest, most beautiful chapter of her life. Outside, snow began to fall again, gentle and soft, coating the world in white. But inside the cabin, Catherine was warm and safe and loved, surrounded by the family she had chosen and the life she had fought to build. And in that moment, everything was exactly as it should be. Everything was, at last, perfectly and completely right.